Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Wednesday, December 28th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Peach Bowl game against Georgia is in 3 days. The game against Michigan in 332 days. We got a chance to talk to Kevin Wilson and a whole bunch of Ohio State players on the offensive side of the ball, as well as Will Muschamp and a whole bunch of Georgia players on the defensive side of the ball on Tuesday. We're going to do the reverse later on today. But first, let's talk about that Ohio State offense and that Georgia defense. I'm joined by Kevin Noon of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Kevin, I guess let's start with the biggest news of the day, which was the guy who wasn't there, and there's been some rumors floating around about, hey, Mayan Williams, like maybe he's not 100% healthy, maybe he got dinged in practice at one point, and then he was on the interview list, and I was like, okay, so he's on the interview list, so we're expecting to talk to him. And then Mayan Williams didn't show up, and we got Chip Trayanum instead. And I think it's reasonable to wonder, hey, the official story was, hey, he's just feeling a little under the weather. But I think it's reasonable to wonder, okay, maybe there might be a little more going on there.
Well, and that's the $1 million question at this point. We certainly have talked to some people. I mean, I've heard that there's not much to this rumor, but then again, could the circle be tightening? Could they be putting disinformation out there for whatever reason? There's not a lot of upside to be like super sneaky and deceptive on this when in a couple days we're going to know it's not going to significantly change how Georgia would prepare for Ohio State's running game. I mean, obviously, the Bulldogs would be thrilled if Mayan Williams didn't play or were severely degraded from what his peak condition could be for a game, game 13 for the Buckeyes this year. I want to really know what is going on in terms of the usage of somebody like Dallin Hayden, because obviously we saw Chip Trayanum today. They seem to forget about Dallin Hayden in the Michigan game. Hopefully they have not forgotten about him, because even if there isn't anything wrong with Mayan Williams, I think a three-headed monster certainly provides a little bit more upside, because we're really not in the days of anybody having a 35 carry back anymore. And if you're riding somebody 35 carries, you have to kind of sit there and look at the circumstances of why.
Yeah, well, Michigan was riding Blake Corum for 25, 30 carries a game until eventually you break down. Eventually that does catch up with you. And Corum then hurt and missed a couple games. And I don't remember if he's back for the. I don't think he's back for the Fiesta Bowl.
No.
So, yeah, I mean, you really kind of can't do that forever. And if Williams is able to go, and you're able to sort of piece together Mayan Williams and Chip Trayanum and Dallin Hayden, and Trayanum talked about the fact that those guys do have some sort of complementary skill sets where Williams and Trayanum are kind of similar backs, broadly speaking. Trayanum said he weighs about 229, 230 pounds right now, which is kind of right in the area where Mayan Williams is as well. But, you've got Dallin Hayden brings a little bit of a different guy, a little bit of a different game, a little bit, where he's maybe got a little more burst and not necessarily as much of a between the tackles guy, but they can be complementary pieces. And they may continue to be complementary pieces next year. We'll see if Mayan Williams is back for another year. We'll see TreVeyon Henderson, what's going on with him. We'll see Dallin Hayden. I mean, it feels like everyone is just kind of like, you could kind of say anyone's a question mark at this point. But, Chip Trayanum was asked, so what do you want to be when you grow up next year? If he was a running back at Arizona State, came to Ohio State as a linebacker, now playing running back. And he was asked, so have you talked to the coaching staff about what you want to do next year? And he hasn't, but he has an opinion.
Yeah, he certainly would like to remain on offense. I mean, that was the position that he was recruited at coming out of high school. Ohio State certainly saw a linebacker at that point. Trayanum wanted to play running back and ended up at Arizona State, as Arizona State was a program that liked him at back. Certainly was riding backs very much, a lot of carries. And then he comes to Ohio State to play linebacker. Oh, wait, Jim Knowles runs a 4-2-5. There are only two linebackers on the field at a time. And he's not exactly a Will, and I don't think he can play Mike. So, at least on the regular. So I think he absolutely wants to be a running back, and maybe the conversations haven't been completely had yet, but it sounds like that might be what ends up being the case if that is his pleasure.
Well, Ryan Day said a couple weeks ago that they would sit down and talk after the year, but really was kind of up to Chip. And when Chip was told that, he said, "Oh, well, then I guess I'm going to be playing running back." So sounds like that may end up being the answer. The conversation has not been officially had, but sounds like that may end up being the answer there. So that's just a little bit on the running backs. It doesn't feel, though, like the running backs are going to be really what decides this game. I mean, maybe it does. Maybe Chip Trayanum runs for 250 yards, and if he does, that's probably a pretty good thing for Ohio State.
85 yards to the heart of the South.
Yeah, I do not expect Chip Trayanum to run for 250 yards. If he does, that is probably a very good thing for Ohio State's chances, but I'm not expecting it. I am expecting the potential difference to be, can Ohio State throw the ball deep? Because it feels like that's the one area where Georgia's defense is very, very good overall, but you have seen them get hit over the top some this year. And CJ Stroud has been, Ohio State has thrown the ball deep, but they have tended to be a little conservative in that area. And I think the reasonable question for CJ Stroud right now is he willing to just sort of take his shots downfield? Is he willing to throw the ball and just, even if there's a coverage there, throw it up and try and let one of your receivers win it?
Well, I think it all starts with how well Ohio State is going to be able to protect C.J. Stroud. It's science. It takes a little bit of time for the receiver to run down the field to be able to have the deep shot thrown to him. So if the interior line breaks down and Jalen Carter is in there introducing himself to C.J. Stroud early and often, then you're not going to have the time to do that. I mean, even on a simple 9 route, we're not even talking about a bunch of double moves and things of that nature. But I think that Ohio State does need to take the top off a little bit. I was talking to a friend of mine who covers Georgia. He said that Keely Ringo, the talented young cornerback, is about 10 pounds overweight of where they would like to have him. Aren't we all? And, he's playing at 220 instead of 210. And while he has great size at 6'2" and he's long, he isn't necessarily where he needs to be in terms of some of those other metrics, and teams have found success. LSU can find success. There have been other teams that have been able to do it, and I just think that obviously the receiver knows where he's going and the defensive back doesn't. But a lot of it, too, is going to be a case of, does Ohio State have a viable second target that is on for the whole game? If not, you just have safety help over the top. You bracket Marvin Harrison, and you take your chances with Emeka Egbuka and Julian Fleming, and if Jaden Ballard gets his name called, or Xavier Johnson. But I think that a deep ball game is good in a lot of ways. Of course, there will be people with the eye of hindsight who will be like, if Ohio State doesn't win the game, why'd you throw it so much? Why'd you throw it so much? Why didn't you try to grind it out? Why didn't you do this? So, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, it does. It does. Just having watched Georgia, it does feel like that is where Ohio State is going to have to win it, because I don't see Ohio State being able to run the ball consistently against that Georgia defense, because really no one has run the ball consistently against that Georgia defense. The Georgia defensive coaches who we talked to were asked about who this Ohio State team reminds them most of in terms of just the skill talent and all that on the offense. And one of them said LSU and one of them said Tennessee and LSU. And, LSU put up 30 points, and it was, they lost the game by 20 points. So, 30 points is not bad, but Tennessee put up 13, and it was 6 for most of the game. So, we'll see whether and there were plays available to Tennessee in that game, and Hendon Hooker just overthrew some deep shots on that one. So.
Well, and remember in the LSU game that there was a quarterback change.
Mm-hmm.
Jaden Daniels, who's the more mobile quarterback, ends up getting Malachi crunched in that game and ends up coming out after already being kind of hurt. Mm-hmm. And they bring in Garrett Nussmeier, who goes deep. He is much more of the C.J. Stroud recipe, and Nussmeier had a lot of success, and people will be like, wow. Also remember that LSU never really got it all that close. Once it kind of got away, it stayed away. But LSU's did find some plays, and there was one moment of where if LSU would have scored, maybe would it have turned up the heat a little bit on UGA? We don't know. I don't try to use my hindsight to bring that up again. But I think that it's certainly showed Ohio State some things. And, of course, everybody's like, well, Georgia's going to fix it. Well, if it was as simple as doing that, Ohio State would probably be on defensive coordinator Kerry Combs, because he would be like, well, we're just going to fix it. I mean, that saying it doesn't, you can't speak that into existence no matter how hard we may try.
And, for Ohio State, they know they're not going to win this game 17-13. Kevin Wilson said, he's almost a direct quote, we're not going to win this game 17-13. They know on average teams have won in the playoff and scored something on the neighborhood of 42 points. And they know they're going to have, that was something we heard from Ryan Day, you're going to have to score into the 40s. Kevin Wilson talked about it again on Tuesday. You're going to have to score high 30s, low 40s to have a chance to win this game. I think that changes how you approach things, not just in terms of a fourth down decision making that, hey, it's 4th and 3 and we can't settle for a field goal here. We've got to try and get 7, and so you're more likely to be going for it. But that also changes how you're calling plays on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd downs as well. And, this is one of those things where I'm a little bit in I'll believe it when I see it mode, because I've just seen Ryan Day have so many of these games where he's kicking field goals in the first half, and it just sort of all looks very predictable. But, we keep hearing the things from all of the Ohio State offensive assistants that, they know 17 points is not going to win this game, 23 points is not going to win this game. You got to get into the high 30s, low 40s. And, again, I kind of want to see it before I really believe it, but the message has been consistent enough that I'm now kind of starting to wonder if they really do mean it this time.
Which would be more painful to see as the average first down call, the little quick out, or the little quick bubble, or the A gap run?
Oh boy, I don't think either of them are going to work particularly well.
No, neither of them.
Just based on how Georgia has tackled this year, but I guess I think, boy.
If we see either, it's going to be a long night.
Yeah, I'm just kind of going back and forth in my head, and I choose none of the above.
Right.
How about that?
So, if there is this belief, first of all, you've got to have more success on first down. Okay, you call it. If it works, you're a genius. If it doesn't, you're an idiot and you need to go. But secondly, Ohio State cannot shoot itself in the foot. Ohio State cannot have pre-snap penalties, cannot have false starts, cannot have delay of games. You can't have a 12-yard run that is called back by a bad hold. And all of that, that's very simplistic. It's like, well, obviously you don't want to have any of that, but Ohio State has been Ohio State's own worst enemy in some of these games of where it has been talent equated and the Buckeyes need to come out and play a good game. And let's be honest, Mercedes-Benz Stadium is going to be significantly pro-Georgia, especially with the travel nightmares. And I know there are a lot of Ohio State fans here in Georgia and from Florida and the Deep South that will come out, but Georgia fans that live in Athens only have to come 75 miles. Atlanta, for being a big melting pot and probably not truly a southern city, it is a northern city in the South where everybody seems to end up to go to work. I guarantee you there are a lot of Georgia alum that live here. There are a lot of people who have lived throughout the entire state of Georgia who are UGA fans. So for as great as Ohio State has been in terms of filling stadiums in bowl games and road games, this one's going to be a tough ticket.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough ticket. It's going to be a hostile, loud atmosphere, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, a little bit later on in the week. One thing I did want to wrap up with today, I'm going to play you a clip from the interview we did with Georgia defensive coordinator Will Muschamp. And, he's someone who you probably remember as the head coach of Florida and South Carolina. He came on Georgia's staff as an analyst and then now has just in a very short time is now their defensive coordinator. He was also a player at Georgia in the early 90s. He was a safety at Georgia from 1991 to 1994, which meant he was on the 1992 Georgia team that played in the 1993 Citrus Bowl against Ohio State. And that was the only previous matchup between these two teams. And a reporter asked him what he remembered about that game, so I just want to play that clip for you here.
Can you take us back to January 1st, 93 in the Citrus Bowl, the only time Georgia's played Ohio State? What do you remember from that game?
It was a good win for the Dogs, so we had a not game, but I guess a luncheon and Herbstreit got up and threw a pass across the room, I knew we had a shot to win. So make sure he knows I said that.
So a little shade there from Will Muschamp towards a guy who has made a decent living not throwing a football, but talking about people throwing a football. So, I guess Kirk Herbstreit got the last laugh in some ways, but still, I thought that was a nice little moment of levity there from Will Muschamp.
Anybody who defends Kirk Herbstreit's throwing needs a big dose of reality pills because he was not a great quarterback. And you could be the biggest pro Herbie guy in his broadcasting career. I mean, I remember him on Columbus radio and probably a lightly listened to radio show before he got elevated to the major leagues. But yeah, I probably would have felt the same way too, seeing it there. And it is what it is. No, it's not bulletin board material. No, CJ Stroud isn't going to be like, you can't say that to our pledges. Only we can say that to our pledges. That it's not going to matter. It was a funny anecdote, and we all got a pretty good chuckle out of it.
Yeah, that was not a great Ohio State team. They tied Michigan that year 13-13, and then went on to lose the Citrus Bowl against Georgia. The year before, they really started turning into what the John Cooper era really turned into, where they shared the Big Ten title the next year again with Wisconsin, and then really got it rolling in the mid-90s. So kind of the last kind of like Ohio State team before they sort of really got it started getting things rolling under John Cooper. So hope you guys enjoyed that. We will have a whole lot more from down here in Atlanta coming up on Wednesday. We have interviews with Ohio State's defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, a whole bunch of the Buckeyes defensive players, as well as Georgia offensive coordinator Todd Monken, and a bunch of the Georgia offensive players. That will all be coming up on Wednesday morning. We also are going to have, we get a chance to watch Ohio State in practice a little bit on Wednesday.
I'm stretching. Just stretching.
Just a little bit. So, but we'll get a chance to go see Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the first time. That's where Ohio State's practicing this week. So we'll get a chance to do that, and we'll have a whole bunch of stuff, video and photos and full reports, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We also, on Tuesday afternoon, did something new. We have typically done a bunch of live shows on YouTube, and we'll continue to do some of those. Tuesday afternoon, we did a live show especially for our BuckeyeHuddle.com members. We're going to probably do some more of that stuff before the Peach Bowl and then continue to do that kind of moving through the off season as well. So if you enjoy our live stuff on YouTube, consider becoming a member at BuckeyeHuddle.com, because some of that stuff, not all, we'll continue doing stuff on YouTube as well, but some of that stuff is going to end up being exclusive to our members at BuckeyeHuddle.com. So if you have been thinking about signing up, might be a good time to do that, because we'll have some stuff especially for members there. So make sure you check that out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.